India versus England, one of the most competitive series going around in world cricket right now. For those on the podcast, well, we've got someone that you would have heard of a bit on this podcast already. And for those on YouTube, you will see we've got a very good friend of the show, Nikesh Rughani, back with us to discuss the third test, obviously previewing the penultimate test of this series, a big one, Ahmedabad, day-nighter. Nikesh, great to have you back. A very exciting series. How much are you looking forward to it?
Welcome to the Picture. Welcome to the Picture.
Yeah, great to be back. Great series, greatly set up with it being 1-1 going to Ahmedabad. Pink ball test match in that fantastic new stadium as well. Great to see cricket back in Gujarat and at this wonderful new stadium in Modera. 120,000 capacity or whatever it is. I'm not sure we'll see that many people there for this particular test. There was a quote from Sourav Ganguly, the president of the BCCI, saying that all the tickets have sold out. I don't know quite what he meant by that, whether that was the ticket allocation that was given for the match or it's a complete sellout. We'll have to wait and see. I assume it's probably going to be 30% full, 40% full, something along those lines. But it's going to be great to see the teams playing in that atmosphere, on that ground, with the series tied at 1-1. India coming back brilliantly well in Chennai. Lots of talk about the wicket and the toss and things like that in both of those games that were held in Chennai. We'll see quite a different wicket, I think, in Ahmedabad. And obviously, with the pink ball, nobody quite knows what that's going to do in those conditions. India have only played one pink ball test at home so far. That was at Eden Gardens. Lots of things to look forward to with this one.
Yeah, great that you mentioned that. Tymal, I'm going to come to you now. Ahmedabad, just to give you guys a bit of context, the last test was played there was 2012, and guess by who? India and England. And actually, a lot of high scores on that one, because we saw India get 521 batting in their first innings, and in the third innings, we saw England get over 400. They got 406. So, Tymal, a day-night test, we've discussed it a bit before in our other shows. How do you expect these conditions to play going based on day-night test matches overall?
Yeah, look, this should be, in theory, a very different test match to the one that we've seen for the first two occasions in Chennai. That's obviously been either reverse swing or spin dominated. This should be very different. The pink ball, the pink SG ball, we don't quite know how that's going to perform. There's been a lot of talk of how it broke up very quickly and was very raggedy in the first couple of test matches. The Indians in particular weren't happy with the ball. So the pink ball itself will be interesting to see what happens there. Obviously, you've got to take into account under lights how it performs, the second new ball, and all the things that come with day-night cricket when you time declaring, so you can make sure you're batting at the best times of the day. It's a whole different dynamic is pink ball and day-night cricket. One that probably England have fared better at so far in kind of the short history of it than the Indians. There's been some very low scores very recently in pink ball cricket. India themselves skittled by Australia in a pink ball test match not so long ago. So there'll be a few demons there. There'll be a few batters whose techniques will be challenged, and there'll be a bit more pressure on the fast bowlers to step up with what should be more friendly conditions for them to bowl with. So maybe in terms of team selection, which I'm sure we'll get to later, you might see a little bit more bias towards the fast bowlers as opposed to the spinners. But it's going to be a really interesting test match, and one that comes at a good time. Obviously, one all in the series. So to throw this pink ball test in now, it's worked out perfectly in my opinion.
Nikesh, you want to touch on that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, traditionally the wicket at Ahmedabad, you mentioned the last test that was played there, lots of runs scored in that particular one. Traditionally, it's a typical Indian wicket. You can score big runs. There is always a little bit in it for the quicks with the very new ball, and then it kind of dies down. There's always a little bit of spin early on, and that kind of gets more exaggerated as we get into day 3, 4, and 5. The toss can be fairly crucial in terms of winning the toss, batting first when conditions are best. But as England showed last time they were there in 2012, you can score big if you bat properly on days 3, 4, and 5 as well. So you know, it's got a bit of everything normally, that wicket. But as I say, it's a brand new ground built on the same site as the old ground. Everything's been relaid. There's only been a couple of games held there since the ground has been rebuilt, and those were domestic T20 games most recently in the Syed Mushtaq Ali Trophy. The first real event of any note there was actually Donald Trump visiting Prime Minister Modi when 100,000 screaming Indians welcomed the then American president. We won't go into that, but yeah, there's been no sort of real events of note apart from those couple of matches in the domestic T20. So a lot of people unsure about how this wicket is going to play. And the team dynamics are going to be interesting as well in terms of, you know, do you pick an extra steamer for these types of conditions? Both sides, you know, are England at an advantage because they've got Ben Stokes playing in the middle order and he could be that third seamer for them. Do the Indians need to bring in somebody like a Hardik Pandya for this one to give them that extra sort of similar option as well? So lots of interesting sort of subplots to this one, and lots of unknowns as well with it being a brand new ground.
Yeah, I would like to look at the selection. Well, we're going to look at selection later, but in terms of the pink ball effect on each team, let's start with India, guys, because obviously Luke Dunners, our great stats man, has provided a great stat, which really, you know, rang out at me. It rung a bell in my mind. Umesh Yadav has the most wickets for India in day-night test. He's got 11 in 2 matches. Ishant Sharma second with 9 in just the 1 match. And then Ravichandran Ashwin, he's only got 5 wickets in 2 matches. Now, Nikesh, I'll start with you. Do you think that we've seen India's reliance on Ashwin and his ability to pick up wickets? Do you think that this test we could see them more rely on their paces and it's sort of a less impactful role for Ravichandran Ashwin?
Could well be that way. The last time India played day-night at home at Eden Gardens, it was against Bangladesh, so you know, not as strong an opposition as England will be this time around. But all of the Bangladeshi wickets were taken by Indian seamers in that Test match, including Ishant, who took those 9 wickets at 8.67. So he certainly enjoyed bowling himself in those conditions. It's just a case of, you know, if the seamers can get the job done like they did on that occasion, you don't need your spinners to come into action. I mean, you talk about Ravichandran Ashwin there, just the 5 wickets in the 2 day-night test matches. I think he's got an average of 15 or something like that. So it shows that he has bowled pretty well when he has had the chance to bowl. He's just not had the chance to bowl as often because the seamers are getting the job done. And that is the case with Indian cricket now. They've got some quality seamers. Ishant Sharma there, Umesh Yadav, who you know, may or may not make it for the squad for the 3rd test match, pending his injury situation. Even if he does, he may not be selected. You know, they've got Jasprit Bumrah, of course, who, you know, we all know what he can do with the ball. And if they get somebody like a Hardik Pandya in the side, maybe we won't see as much of the spinners. So, yeah, it'll be interesting in terms of the makeup of the sides. But Ashwin, the way he's been batting, will still be a very valuable player for India, you know, coming in at number 7 or 8 and hopefully getting some valuable runs for them down the order.
Yeah, Tymal, we've
need to get you a new microphone, Nikhil.
Well, I'm not sure what that is because usually that doesn't happen. I'm going to make a report. So anyways, yeah, Tymal, we've touched on Umesh Yadav, Ishant Sharma, these guys, and looking at the 2nd test and their stats. In terms of your take, because obviously being a fast bowler yourself, how much do you think these guys are looking forward to bowling in a day-nighter like this?
Yeah, I think so. I think especially after the way the first 2 test matches have gone, where it hasn't been an awful lot of fun to bowl fast bowling, especially that 2nd test at Chennai, where you know the fast bowlers barely bowled at all in comparison to the spinners. In theory, it should be a bit more fast bowler friendly, obviously, especially when you get under lights and if you get the 2nd new ball, and you know depending on what time the 2nd innings starts. It should, in theory, do more. But as I said, this pink SG ball is a little bit more unknown as opposed to games played with the pink Kookaburra or the pink Duke, where there have been more day-night test matches so far. So you'd be encouraged. Obviously, we're at a new stadium, as we said. You don't know how the conditions are going to play. The floodlights, there's all those different things, the temperature changes, you don't know what the humidity is going to be like. Those are all things that impact fast bowling and the amount that the ball swings, and all the advanced science that comes into it. But in theory, this should be a test match where the fast bowlers are more involved and have a bigger part to play. As Nikesh just said, that the last time India played Bangladesh, all the wickets were taken by the fast bowlers in one of the innings. So it should be a good spectacle to watch, a different spectacle. As I said, it was kind of captivating, and it was still entertaining to watch. Ashwin and Axar Patel spinning the ball past the bat with the big bounce, men around the bat, and we might get a different challenge in terms of seeing the ball swing and seam for a little bit longer in this test match.
Yeah, and I thought I would mention, in terms of a batting perspective, Virat Kohli, he averages the most in day-and-night tests for India of 71. So another stat which goes in favor of Virat Kohli pretty much basically all when it comes to batting. But to move on to England fast bowling point of view, obviously the two names that ring out to everyone, Broad, Anderson. We haven't seen them feature together away from home in quite some while. Anderson, 14 wickets in 3 matches, Stuart Broad, 10. Now, don't give away too much, guys, because we're going to talk about that in our selection time. But I'm sure England must be fancying their chances, Tymal, in this day-night test with such experienced bowlers. And then you've got Jofra Archer coming back into the frame, Mark Wood available for selection. So from an England point of view, how much do you think they'll be fancying their chances of doing well, especially their fast bowlers in this game?
Yeah, as I said, in theory, this test match in these circumstances should play a little bit more into England's hands, with the game potentially favouring the fast bowler a little bit more. But it's just, who do you pick? I know so we're going to get into selection a little bit later, what teams we think are or what we should be picked. But with the quality and the depth that England do have in their pace bowling ranks and the swing bowling, I think England day-night test match, I think back to the Adelaide Oval during Ashes tour a few years ago, and Jimmy Anderson was essentially bowling like a left-hander, wasn't he? Left arm over bowler. He was bowling right arm around the wicket to the right-handed batsman, but swinging it back in under lights, and it was some of the most kind of captivating and mesmerising bowling you're likely to see, with that pink Kookaburra ball under lights at the Adelaide Oval, I think it was. So England have history. They have guys that are obviously very capable of swinging the ball, swinging this pink ball. Jimmy Anderson obviously more so than most, and then, as you say, it's going to be a bit of a toss-up as in who plays for the rest of the outfit as well. And Ben Stokes, I think, will become a bigger part of the match as well in terms of his bowling workload. So as you say, I think England will come into this game a little bit more confident as opposed to on the back of the last Test match. But look, we could swing a massive surprise here if we could rock up at Ahmedabad, and they could be an absolute raging turner from ball one again if India have their way. So we'll see. The conditions will play a huge part, and it's whoever manages those best will come out on top, I'm sure.
Nikesh, your take on England and their fast bowlers and what sort of impact they can have?
Yeah, I mean, there is always that issue of Broad, Anderson, haven't played together away from home for so long. Is this now the time? And we'll talk about that in more detail shortly. But I don't think England want to get too carried away with the fact that it's a pink ball, with the fact that it's a day-night test match. It's not going to be like Adelaide. It's not going to be like anywhere they would have played a day-night test match before. India would be naive, really, to go into this one with a completely different wicket to the one we saw in Chennai. Okay, there were a lot of questions about that. Was it sort of fit to last the full 5 days? And I don't think we'll see exaggerated turn from ball one of the Test match in Ahmedabad, but it will turn. It's going to be a turning wicket. They will make it to suit their strengths, really. And when you consider that it's the home ground of Jay Shah, who's the secretary of the BCCI. They have a lot of say on how these wickets are prepared. The team management were very adamant in Chennai, the Indian team management, that they wanted a turning wicket, something that turned from day one, so the toss wasn't as crucial, so either team could have that ability to take wickets on day one, and that's exactly what they got. So having won that test match, they're not going to all of a sudden prepare something that would suit the quick bowlers, hands down. So I don't think England want to get too carried away with the fact that it's pink ball under lights. Yes, it might do a little bit more in that evening session, but it's going to turn. You're probably going to need to play 2 spinners both sides, and that all-rounder is then going to be that crucial third seamer. So yes, it might do a bit more for the quicks. We'll see them in action a little bit more, particularly towards the end of each day probably, but it's going to turn. It's India. That's just what's going to happen.
So yeah, I think you make a very good point, because obviously people will look at those stats that we've discussed and say, well, wow, you know, I expect a lot from the fast bowlers in this test. But we have to remember they are playing in India. These conditions are most likely to turn. But one thing to note, I found it quite interesting with both teams. The last time England played a day-night test, they were bowled up for 58, and then we can't forget India being bowled up for 36 against Australia in their last game. So we have seen some low scores. I think it'll be you might get a result in this one, and it should be pretty exciting. And in terms of, you know, a lot of runs scored, but even wickets being taken. So we'll have to wait and see. But now, sorry, just before I get to selection, just to give the records of each team in the day-night test for our viewers out there. England 1 win, 2 losses, and India 1 win, 1 loss, and 1 draw. So a lot on the line for these two teams. Obviously, the World Test Championship, India need this to get to the final. England also need it if they want to get to the final as well. Guys, the $1 million question, selection. Okay, so a lot of factors to bear in mind here. Obviously, Mark Wood, and it was supposed to be Sam Curran, but we've just been given word that he may not be coming to the test anymore. These guys were cleared to play after the second test. Someone like a Johnny Bairstow as well, if I'm not mistaken. They're supposed to come in for these last 2 tests. So England have hit those guys to welcome back. But however, I've lost Moeen Ali that I think may be crucial in terms of that depth that we saw in the last test with their bowling and even his batting at the end there. So I think this is a very tough question. I would not want to be in you guys' position to tell me what sort of selection. Tymal, I'll go with you first.
No.
Now, Nikesh has just mentioned that he expects it to spin. So even though it's a day-night test and we've seen. So do you, first of all, answer this question for me. Do you think we'll get to see both Broad and Anderson, or will we just see Jimmy Anderson, who's rested for that second test?
Yeah, I don't think they'll play both of them. I think especially Stuart Broad obviously wasn't quite on the money in that last test match that he did come in and play at, whereas Jimmy Anderson was obviously brilliant in the first test. So I think you obviously Best will come in for Moeen Ali if the pitch is to be expected and is likely to take turns. So you'll have Best and Jack Leach as 2 of your bowlers. I think Jimmy Anderson will come in for Stuart Broad, and then it's tough. That last choice is you're picking between mainly Archer, Wood and Stone. Stone did a good job. I can't imagine he'll keep his place, even though he did perform amicably, or more than amicably. So that I'd feel that Jofra Archer will come back into the side. Mark Wood obviously hasn't been in the country again for too long. Maybe hasn't had enough time to maybe get the overs under his belt that they would have liked. So I'd guess Archer would come in. But for me, probably the biggest key to England bowling attack is Ben Stokes. Is he fit to bowl a decent amount of overs if the conditions are kind of going that way, where it is doing a little bit more than normal? You are bowling those higher overs of seam. Obviously, we've seen with Ben Stokes, some games he barely bowls, some games he has a high workload. So they obviously manage him very well. And has it been a case of, okay, we're going to save you in these first 2 test matches, not over bowl you at all. So come this third test match, this pink ball match, which may do a little bit more, then he's available to maybe bowl some more overs. So I think his fitness, his availability with the ball, or Joe Root's willingness to bowl him is actually going to be quite important.
Yeah, I'd agree. I certainly think Archer will be partnering Jimmy Anderson, and I think England will be wasting their opportunity if they go for any other combination. They're their 2 best pace bowlers in these conditions. Obviously, Anderson with what he did in the first match, the reverse swing, the conventional swing with the pink ball, which hopefully he'll get. And Archer, we saw how he troubled the Indian batsman with that extra pace, and he's used to bowling in these conditions, obviously in the IPL, playing night cricket over in India as well. So I certainly think that those will be the 2 frontline seamers. And then as far as the spinners go, yeah, Best will come in for Moeen Ali, I feel, to partner Jack Leach, and Stokes is going to have to do a lot more bowling. And, whether or not they've planned for this or not, there's sort of no reports that he's not fit or fully fit to bowl. So I expect him to bowl quite a few overs in this test, providing it does a bit in the evening session under the lights. I think the batting is going to be interesting, really, with Johnny Bairstow back. So does he slot in straight at number 3, replace Dan Lawrence? Does Rory Burns keep his place as well? That's going to be another interesting question here. Zach Crawley is there. Does he come in and get his opportunity in the third test match at the top of the order? Rory Burns hasn't quite looked good enough really out there opening the batting at the moment. Dan Lawrence looked good making his debut in Sri Lanka. Hasn't quite done it in India, has been found out a little bit. Johnny Bairstow, you'd expect would come in at number 3 to replace Lawrence. It's just at the top of the order. Does Burns get one more chance, or does Crawley come in?
Before you get to the batting, Tymal, consider this one thing that I actually realized. I pretty much expect Dan Lawrence to go out, whether that is for Crawley or is for Bairstow, Nikesh. But my question to you, Tymal, is do you think England sort of lose out on the bowling option that Dan Lawrence provides if he does go out? I mean, he hasn't been fantastic with the bat, and you would expect someone like a Zach Crawley to come in. But how big of an impact do you think it will be for England if they are to lose out on a Dan Lawrence's bowling option, that spin option that we know he has?
Yeah, in theory, yes, but he doesn't actually bowl that much. He's England's 4th bowler, really. Joe Root bowls ahead of him, so Joe Root's actually looked pretty tidy, hasn't he, with the ball in the Test matches so far at Chennai. You're getting some decent turn, to be fair. So Joe Root will play as the 3rd spinner, as you say. If Lawrence is to miss out, they won't miss an awful lot. It's just a case of how many changes England want to make, I think, moving forward. As you say, Bairstow to come in. You'd expect at number 3, and then as Nikesh said, it's just whether they also want to bring in Crawley for Rory Burns, who has looked out of sorts, or if they want to give Rory Burns the benefit of the doubt and give him another Test match. So there's going to be plenty of changes. It's just maybe how many and who they are. It's going to be an interesting one to keep an eye on leading up to that first Test and the toss.
Good to hear that you both kind of agree on the 11s for England. Let's get to India now, because I think there's a lot to discuss here as well. For me, I think their batting is pretty much set. It's done well in both tests, and they'll be pretty happy, obviously, winning a test match. You don't love to change winning combinations. However, I did see some clips of Jasprit Bumrah bowling the pink ball during that second test, so it's clear that he's revving to come back in for maybe a Mohammad Siraj, or, I don't see them really dropping Ishant Sharma. Tymal, where do India go in terms of selection? Because interestingly enough, as Nikesh mentioned earlier, Umesh Yadav, if he passes the fitness test, will be available for selection. And he has gotten 11 wickets in 2 day-night test matches for the Indians. So do you think that they should go back to him in place of someone like a Kuldeep Yadav? Or opt for, obviously you're going to bring back Bumrah maybe for Siraj, or you opt for bringing in that extra seamer and then the Hardik Pandya one as well. But first, touch on Jasprit Bumrah and Umesh Yadav. Can you see them both coming back in?
Yeah, I think Bumrah will definitely come back in. He was obviously managed his work. He obviously picked up an injury in Australia, so they obviously wanted to manage him. So he'll come back in. And then I think Umesh Yadav obviously has a brilliant record, doesn't he, in Test match cricket in India, particularly in day-night Test matches as well. So if he's fit, if they're happy with him, I think he'll come in potentially for Kuldeep Yadav. And then I think you're confident and happy enough riding with Ashwin and Axar Patel as your 2 spinners. You're giving yourself a longish tail as such, a lot of pressure on Ashwin with the bat, which obviously we know he can deliver on after that brilliant performance in the last Test match. So I'd expect there to be a couple of changes. If Umesh Yadav is fit, I'd him to come in for Kuldeep Yadav. So you have a 3-prong pace attack. So obviously India, as we've spoken about, they don't have that luxury of Ben Stokes batting in the top 5 and also being a genuine seam bowler. So they have to go in with a slightly longer tail, which will be obviously something that England will try and capitalise on should they get past Ravi Ashwin at kind of number 7. So a couple of changes, but I'd expect Bumrah and Yadav, if fit, to come in. If not, Siraj potentially just to keep his place in the side, because he actually looked pretty decent in that last Test match.
Yeah, and people forget that. Sorry, I'm going to come to you now, Nikesh. People forget that Axar Patel actually averages 34 with the bat in first class cricket. But the reason I interrupt you, Nikesh, because I would love to hear from you. You mentioned a very interesting proposition of Hardik Pandya. Is this a direction you think the Indians should be looking to go? And if so, how do you get Hardik Pandya into the team? And can he bowl enough overs to be sort of like that frontline steamer?
He certainly can, and his fitness has been the issue, really. That's the reason why he wasn't involved in the Test series in Australia. Virat Kohli came out and said, Hardik played in all the white ball stuff down in Australia as a pure batsman. But Virat Kohli said, look, as a Test cricketer, he needs to be fully fit to be able to bowl. He's not going to play as a pure batsman. in Test cricket, and here's his opportunity. You know, if he is fit, he's certainly been putting in the yards. We've seen him on the outfield bowling some overs. We've seen him in the gym. He certainly looks in good shape. Whether or not he's fit enough yet to be able to bowl a good number of overs in a Test match, we just don't know what the situation with regards to that is. If he is, then that gives them a great option, because he could bat in the top 6. You know, you could push one of those other guys, maybe Rishabh Pant, down to number 7, and then all of a sudden your batting looks a lot stronger, and you have got that genuine seam bowling option there, as well as your 2 spinners and your 2 other frontline seamers. If Hardik Pandya isn't fit, and they go with that same top 6, which I don't see there's any reason why they wouldn't, then that number 7 position becomes a bit of a question. Do they go with Akshar Patel and Ravichandran Ashwin as those 7 and 8, in whichever order they might go, or is Ravi Jadeja fit? We don't know if he's fully fit yet. He probably isn't going to make it for the 3rd Test match. If he's fit, you'd think he would come in at number 7, Ashwin at 8, and then they'd play the 3 seamers. And I'd agree with Tymal that Umesh Yadav will probably come in for Kuldeep Yadav, and then you'd have Jasprit Bumrah back in for Mohammad Siraj alongside Ishant Sharma. So there's a few little selection headaches. I suppose they know better than us, the Indian camp, who's fully fit and who's not, and they will have an idea in their head as to what they'll do. I've got a feeling they'll, either way, if Jadeja's not fit to play and Hardik Pandya's probably not quite ready yet, they'll probably go with the same 2 spinners in Akshar and Ashwin, and they'll bring in Umesh Yadav, Kuldeep Yadav, and Mohammad Siraj will sit out for Jasprit Bumrah.
Yeah, good analysis. Good analysis there, guys. Now, final portion of the show, a very, tough one. The prediction, because Tymal, at the beginning of the series, well, after the first test, we picked 2-1. But looking at the statistics and how these day-night tests have gone traditionally, I find it very hard to see this game drawing. So, first of all, Tymal, I'll come to you. Are you revising your prediction of 2-1 to England? Because you said that this test would draw and England would win the 4th. But I don't know, man. I think we're bound to see a result here with this exciting day-night cricket. So let's hear your prediction first of this game, and then if this has any impact on your series prediction.
Yeah, I've got to stand by my word, haven't I? Somehow, even though you've made a very valid point, I'm not going to backtrack. So I'll try and find a way for this to be an absolute. Hopefully, the pitch is absolutely dead and it's an absolute snooze fest. The ball doesn't move off the straight, and just for the sake of my predictions. But you're right. All signs do lead to there being a result in this Test match, especially how both teams have tend to bat under lights in day-night cricket. So. Yeah, I think if it is quite conditioned on the pitch and the conditions, how much swing, how much spin there is. If the Indians produce a pitch in which they should do, that does turn and does turn a decent amount, you'd like to think England would improve and would learn from the mistakes of the second Test match, but you'd still think that India would have too much, especially if Bumrah and Yadav are back. That makes their whole bowling attack a lot more complete. Ishant Sharma, Jasprit Bumrah, Umesh Yadav, Akshar Patel and Ravi Ashwin is a very decent bowling attack in all conditions, really. So the England batsmen will be up for a tough time of it, especially with a couple of guys out of form. We've spoken about Rory Burns, Johnny Bairstow coming into the side, having obviously had a couple of weeks off and not played an awful lot of cricket. So there's some guys under a lot of pressure. But in terms of a prediction, you'd probably give India the edge going into this Test match on the back of the last one, and in theory, their side being strengthened with the guys that are coming in.
Yeah, I'd definitely say that there'll probably be a result in this particular one under lights, just the way both teams have fared in those conditions previously. And I've got to say, I'm slightly edging with India here. I know England will be certainly a handful with Jimmy Anderson coming back, and if the pink ball does do a lot in those conditions under lights, he could certainly have a massive impact. I just think the confidence boost that India got from levelling the series in Chennai in the fashion they did, with the home crowd on their side, that's going to be the case once again. I think the crowd is going to have a massive role to play. And when you think about the fact that it's in Gujarat, which hasn't had certainly Ahmedabad hasn't had a Test match for nearly 9 years now. You're probably going to have the Prime Minister there, who's Gujarati himself. You've got that Gujarati connection in the side with Pujara, with Akshar Patel, Jadeja, if he comes in as well. So you've got all that in India's favour. I think, 50,000 people, 40,000 people, however many are going to be in there as well, is going to make a massive difference because, apart from in Australia, we've not been used to seeing this in international cricket. England haven't played with a crowd right up until the Chennai Test match for a very long time. India have sort of been facing hostile Australian crowds as well. I think home crowds make a massive, massive difference, and particularly when your team has just come off the back of a victory, when you've got a captain like Kohli who's really good at firing up his troops. I think the momentum is with India, and I expect them to win this Test match. I think it'll be a lot closer than the last one as well. I think that there won't be that much in it. But I think India will take this one. So yeah, they'll be 2-1 up going into the final one.
Well, it's very hard for me to backtrack on my sentiments. As Tymal said, I picked England to win this series 2-1. If the surface does turn, well, I think my prediction is doomed. However, if India, back their fast bowlers and produce a decent true deck, I think India, I'm going to make a bold statement. I know we have a lot of Indian fans on to watch our show. I think India could be in trouble. I'm not that confident in England's spin department. That's where I think they really lack, not having someone like a Moeen Ali. But I think if the fast bowlers, if a Jimmy Anderson and Jofra Archer, who's proven in these conditions, can do well, boy, oh boy, I think this could be a hell of a test series. So I'm going to still pick England to win this series 2-1. However, if the ball spins in this game, I think that's it for England. Guys, thank you so much for coming on the show. Nikesh Rughani, it was fantastic to have you once again. Great insight. Nikesh, where can we find you on social media on if our fans want to engage with you some more?
So Twitter, Instagram, it's just at Nikesh Rughani on both.
Fantastic, man. Thank you so much for coming on, Tymal. Once again, it was great to have you on, and it's going to be a very coveted third test between England and India, so we can't wait.
Cheers, guys. Thanks again, Nikesh.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Welcome to the Pace Judge. Welcome to the Pace Judge.